Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Christy Taylor, career and executive coach and founder of Work Solutions LLC and Work Global News Magazine. And I am so excited today to bring you another outstanding change maker. And today we're talking to Mr. John Goodwin. He is the president of Galaxy Press and has been involved with book publishing since 1986, and initially publishing all the works of best-selling author L. Ron Hubbard. And from 2002, he was focusing on his fictions work, which includes the internationally acclaimed Writers of the Future anthology. So we've been sitting here having a conversation prior to starting, and he's been teaching me about the works of L. Ron Hubbard, who did his focus was Scientology. So I want to get right into this conversation. John, is there, introduce yourself and then we'll jump right in.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on your show, Christy. I always love making new friends and talking to new people and reaching new audiences. I've been involved with the publishing, like you read, since 1986. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I really enjoy about publishing is being able to meet so many amazing creatives. The contest that you mentioned, Writers of the Future, was a contest that was created by L. Ron Hubbard in 1983. And we're ready in April to celebrate the 41st year, where we have 12 new writers and 12 new artists that are flown in from wherever they are around the world. This year, there's 5 different countries. Last year, there were 8. Total, we've had 50 different countries so far where we've had winners from. And it's an opportunity for a person to have their work seen and acknowledged as originally conceived by L. Ron Hubbard. He directed that the contest be paid for so that it's free to enter. The people that submit stories or art maintain all the rights to their work. It's anonymously judged. So when they submit their story, all the judges see is the story that they write, which is science fiction or fantasy, or the illustrations that they submit, 3 different pieces of art, and a number. So you have no idea if you're male, female, nationality, ethnic, anything. It's just how good are you as a writer or as an artist. And the judges select you, again, based upon just the quality of work alone. So it's a pure meritocracy. We never know where people are from until the judges say, okay, it's number this, that, and the other thing that are the winners. And then we find out where they're from. It's very exciting, and it's amazing. The effect that we've created. It's been almost 1,000 winners now over the years. And no matter where they're from in the world, the contest flies into Hollywood for a week-long workshop. They're put up, they're all staying in a very fancy hotel. It's the Lowe's Hotel here in Hollywood. And it's they're taught them by some of the biggest names in science fiction and fantasy. Now, are you very familiar with science fiction or fantasy at all, Christy?
So we were talking a little bit prior, right? I couldn't think of the name of the guy. Like, listen, there's a book, Science of the Mind, right? So that's one thing, right? The Science of the Mind. And then when we talk about actual science fiction and fantasy itself, I don't read a whole lot of sci-fi books, but I grew up, mom used to always have to watch the Sci-Fi Channel. And then I have a great love for, and I don't know if this falls into science fiction. I would assume, I have this weird type of affinity for like doomsday, nuclear warfare, going to Mars type of fantasy books.
Sure.
There's not a particular author, but I usually will find like a good audio book to listen to
Sure.
while I'm doing work, and I just kind of get caught in that space, right? So
yeah, I totally hear you. Yeah.
Underlining love. So there's two pieces to that, right? And I think it's that Science of the Mind piece is more so religion, that direction there, right? But then there's that kind of just like growing up and being exposed to that Sci-Fi Channel. My mom used to make us watch all episodes of Planet of the Apes, right? The original 1970s version. Right. And going into that now, great start here. And we're going to talk some more about this Writers of the Future contest. And, but I think we need to go back to the root, right? You've been here since 1986. You have worn every hat in this industry. How did you initially kind of get into publishing, and what has kept you passionate about it?
Well, as I was growing up, every summer in school, I would take a different job because I wanted to learn multiple trades, multiple things to see what interests me, and not get stuck in something before I even knew that other things existed. So I was bound and determined I'm going to learn every trade so I can build my own house. That didn't happen, but I can fix anything that needs to be fixed now in a home. One summer, I bought a car that we towed home, and then I rebuilt it from bottom up, so I had a car that drove. So I learned about engines, I learned about transmissions. So I've had kind of like that approach towards life. Um, I got into publishing. Again, I was just doing things, and someone said, "Here's a job." So I started doing it, and so I bounced around. The only part I didn't like was I was in treasury for a little bit in finance. That's not my cup of tea. Doing balance sheets and all that kind of stuff, or working on trade collections from the accounts when you sell them books. I did all that. Did the marketing, did PR publicity. So in 2002, I was asked to start up Galaxy Press, which was the publishing arm strictly for L. Ron Hubbard's fiction works.
Mhm.
It was a bit confusing because when I was started in 86 through 2000, I published Dianetics and Scientology, but then also Battlefield Earth, Mission Earth, all the other earlier fiction works. Yeah. So which
Oh
one
yeah,
would?
because like I've heard of Battlefield Earth
Yeah.
Mission
So
Earth.
Battlefield Earth. Yeah. So those have been like mega bestsellers, international bestsellers, many, many weeks on the New York Times, and they still sell really well. So on that's just a matter of at this point, I get to through the podcasts that I have. I've now just last week I uploaded episode 320. So I've been going at it for a bit, one a week, and it's grown quite a bit. So I have listeners in about 120 countries. It broadcasts every Saturday afternoon and has been, quite successful as it grows. So that is something which I really enjoy. So I meet people, and because of the size of the podcast, I get a lot of really, really good guests. And so I've had a lot of great authors who are the guys that write the books for the movies that you were talking about. So I've got like coming to this event next month. Orson Scott Card, he wrote a book called Ender's Game, which was made into a very big movie in Hollywood. The author that writes Dune, you've seen those movies the last couple of years, the Dune movies. So he writes the books that those are based on. We have another author that wrote a book called On Stranger Tides, which was made into the Johnny Depp movie several years ago. So we have those types of people that are the judges for the contest. One of our illustrators, judges who just did the cover for this next year's book is the art director for Disney and for Netflix. And so he's done a lot of major art direction for movies. So then he's one of the ones that instructs our winning illustrators on here's the technology and here's how to establish a career. The guy that created all the artwork for Dungeons and Dragons and Dragonlance, he's one of our judges. So we have that those are the caliber of people we have with the contest. But because of that, I get to meet these people, and they're such lusciously lovely people. They're so nice, and they so love being able to pay forward themselves to the next generation of writers and artists, which is I just love about this contest is seeing new people being able to experience and realize their dreams. They've wanted to become published. There's over 3 million books a year published. So to be able to get your voice heard is really important. So what this contest does that we do that L. Ron Hubbard initiated in 1983 helps to provide that launching pad for amazingly successful careers.
And you guys not only you've already talked about Writers of the Future contest and the way that these individuals selected to be able to come into this space and have this opportunity to be mentored. So okay, just if I was lucky enough to be selected, to be part of this, be mentored, what would that experience be like for me? Because you're already presenting a high level, right, a level of writing to even get yourself into that space to be judged by these people who are coming in to give back. So their whole goal is to help that person get to their next level. And we're talking about writers and illustrators, right?
Correct.
So what is somebody who's coming into that space, what will they experience? Like what type of feedback are they going to be getting to make sure they reach their maximum potential?
Okay, so that's a great question. So once they find out, because the contest goes every quarter, so every 3 months, it goes from October through December, January through March.
Mhm.
April through June, and July through September. And so every 3 months, three winners are chosen. Um, Three final winners are chosen, and there's a whole selection process that happens. And when they get told that they're winners, then in April, beginning of April, uh, all 12 writers and all 12 winners are flown to Hollywood. So they're flown to Hollywood, and they're picked up. We have people that come and pick them up and bring them to the hotel, the Lowe's Hotel, and then these different people I told you about that wrote these books. They're then the instructors who will go through, and they do for the writers. They'll have very intensive um, instruction on how to raise their game as a writer. But if they win the contest, that means they're now at a professional level of a writer. But now,
Mhm.
how do you have a career as a writer? So now you're getting into some of the pitfalls of, well, how do I avoid getting, taken by a shyster, who's going to get me to sign up for this, give my book, and I don't get any money. And how do I find an agent? And how do I do this? And how do I do that? So when do I quit my day job? All these different things you learn from them. And then they also, because we've got like people that are very well known for writing comedy fantasy or hard science fiction or epic science fiction or urban fantasy, all these different things, they'll do individual hour-long to 2-hour-long workshops on those specific genres. How do you deal with that? And again, with the illustrators, these judges are there and they're doing critiques on their portfolios, but they're also taught, how do you even put together a portfolio? How do you make a presentation to Disney as compared to Marvel, as compared to someone who wants to get a commission, a portrait? How do you do these different things? So this is all, stuff that you don't get in school. This is something that's hard won um, experience that is being shared with these winners, so they don't have to go through what the judges went through to learn this stuff. How do you? We had one girl named B. Jackson from Detroit. She was um, just she lived in the projects and was very, very poor, but she was a brilliant artist. So she won, and she also won the grand prize that year. So she got, in addition to being flown out and their check, she also got an additional check for $5,000, which she used for school. And she's now a major New York Times best-selling illustrator. She illustrated the book Parker Looks Up about Michelle Obama. That became a New York bestseller a couple of years ago. That was her art that did that. And she's done multiple books now. She did one for um, LeBron James, another couple ones too. That she's just an amazing artist. So she comes out every year. I made her a judge, and her whole thing now is help pay forward and give back to other aspiring artists. So with these people, when they come out there, what they can get is connections. They get mentors, and they leave with lifelong friends, because now that you have the internet, they can then everybody that they're co-winners, they're in touch with them for forever. Even some of the winners from going back 40 years before there was the internet, they're still in touch with each other. So it's just you build lifelong bonds, which is what this contest does. And like I said, we're almost about 1,000 people now that have won the contest over the years. But that was the intention of what L. Ron Hubbard created the contest for. And one thing too, you mentioned that you like the dystopian type stuff, but dystopian stuff also has a message of a cautionary tale. Like, if you don't watch it, this could happen. And so it helps to kind of make you, okay, let's be a little bit nicer to each other. Let's being a little bit more like, let's have that conversation instead of just assuming that they're bad and we're going to chop them. So that's an important lesson that science fiction can teach. And one thing that science fiction does is you can take social issues that nobody can talk about. You mention it on social media and you just get like trounced on.
Yeah.
But if you go to science fiction, you go to another planet, other races, other scenarios, and you can have these discussions. And some people say, "Oh, I get it. That's really talking about this thing that's happening right now." But because it's over there, you can actually follow the whole conversation to its end and realize, oh, those are a bunch of ninnies, and kind of realize that, hey, maybe I'm being a ninny here too, and can have a review and to change your thought about what you are currently doing. Writers of the Future is not political, it's not religious, so I'm very keen to not take any sides at all, because especially if you're going to be a writer or an artist, as soon as you take a side and said, I favor politician X or I favor gender Y, then gender Z and politician Q and all those that subscribe to them will immediately, cut you off. And so
Yeah.
you just lost half your potential audience. So that's one thing we go over too. We spend a lot of time on like, what do you really want to do? If your intent is to become a famous writer, an artist, then keep your focus on that. Don't get sidetracked by, because trolls will really trick you up and pull you into the fight. And it's just like, boy, it's death.
There
It's
has to be some level of emotional awareness in there. To your point, oh gosh, there's so many good things that are coming out of this conversation because I can't even think of the name of the movie that kind of has that theme. But it still kind of made me go back to the mom making me watching Planet of the Apes every right, because they kind of had that theme. If you think about that, kind of like this old book, Manor Animal Farm, that we were all
yeah.
back in the day, right? I was thinking, listening to you talk, and I'm thinking, are there any like specific distinctions of the career path, in terms of like in those early years for people who are developing their skills as writers and illustrators? Are there distinct, like, is there a point where the career paths kind of split off, right? Are they going to have some of the same experiences, but then it eventually splits off because one is going in the direction of illustrator, one is writer? Are there any commonalities in that journey? Or are there uniquely different paths and experiences that are carved out?
Yeah, they're pretty different, save the fact that we're talking about creatives. We're talking about people who are trying to express themselves through the arts. So the thing that happened in like the Pulp Fiction days, 1930s, 40s, and 50s, you had the writers that would write stories, but you had illustrators that would illustrate the stories. And so with Writers of the Future, that symbiotic relationship becomes so obvious because you have the illustrator who will, and this is something I'm still always amazed with, but you have the illustrator who will view a story and have images, and you have a writer that'll have a story and will think concepts, words, so I can't even do a good stick person. I'm so bad at illustration, so I'm just always amazed when I look at an artist, what they can do. It's like, I'm always just like, you know, I so admire an artist, what they can do. A good artist, I'm just like so amazed and so impressed. So you've got two different approaches to a story, so you've got an illustrator that will take a story and then they put it so that they'll take a snapshot of the story that the writer has written and they'll illustrate it. And when you see that, you kind of go, oh, I get it. I need to read that story. And that's what a good illustration will do.
Mhm.
A good story enables an illustrator to visualize that snapshot that they can then illustrate. So they work very closely together. And it is very much a symbiotic relationship that's held. We've had a few, probably 5 or 6 people over the 41 years who have won both the writer contest and the illustrator contest. That's a very unique skill set that a person would have to be able to do both. One of the highlights of the week-long workshop when everybody's out here is called the art reveal. The writers and the illustrators have not met. So when they come after the first day or so, we set up a hall and we put all the artwork of the stories. They're on easels in the room, and the artists are standing around the side of the room. We open the doors and let the writers come in. And the writers walk in, and everybody's quiet. And the writers come in and they have to find their story illustration. They walk to it, and as soon as they find it, then the artist comes up and introduces themselves. There's so much emotion in that thing there because the artist is so concerned that they won't recognize their story. You know, they won't recognize the picture. And the writer is so concerned that their story was so hard to illustrate that the illustrator had so much trouble illustrating. And they're both equally introverted about what the other is going to think. And then they get there, and all this emotion finally just goes, and like you see tears, just all over the place as people, meet their artist, and they're like, "Oh my God, this is beautiful. This is amazing. I love this so much. Thank you so much." And they're hugging, and it's just such an emotional thing because you have all these creatives, and they're worried about, because when you do painting, when you do writing, it's like you're bearing your soul. You're like, this is me, and if somebody doesn't like it, then that's part of me. That's me that did that, and that's me that's being rejected, and they're concerned about that, and they've experienced whatever degree of rejection they've had over the years, and that's probably one of the biggest things that people will take away is the acceptance. Like, wow, I did it. For right now, I get it. I'm actually good enough. I actually made the grade. And when they go on the stage for this huge Hollywood gala event that we do, which is a black tie, it's considered the Oscars of science fiction and fantasy. And they're able to speak from the stage. And it's so amazingly, it's so endearing because you see these writers and artists, they're not Hollywood celebrities, but they're on this fancy stage with all these cameras and lights and these audience all dressed up in tuxedos, and they're there in their tuxedo and their fancy dress, and they're up there, and you see them, they got their little speeches, and they're up there like, they're shaking, when you say it, because they're, I want to thank my mom and my dad because they encouraged me, and my sister because she was my best friend, and she was my first reader. How they thank these people. It's just my teacher, from, Mr. Smith, he was like so good. And he's the one that kept me encouraging and got me my first paintbrush, whatever. They're just what they tell their stories. They're so real and so fresh and so honest. And people that come to Hollywood events aren't used to that. They're used to the very glib, the
but for the people that are coming into this is their first time on this type of platform, though.
Yeah,
that is a life experience for them. John,
it
I
is.
want to transition because we talked about you doing this work in publishing, and you briefly mentioned your podcast, and you are on 320 episodes. Your podcast consistently reaches over 2 million listeners per episode. I think that is wow. And you have a goal of 3 million. So not
Yeah,
only are you giving these authors a platform and you're publishing, but you're giving them the space to speak, right?
that's right.
So highlighting the people that you have featured over the years, in 5 years, wow. So you said once a week. What are strategies are helping you to grow to such a strong audience? But I kind of feel like I can answer that question for you because I'm sure that the
Yeah,
people who are coming
got
to
the
your
same thing.
podcast are readers, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so what advice would you give to not only the artists, but if they want to take that passion that they have and turn it into a podcast, what advice do you have for aspiring podcasters?
Well, I think the main thing, and again, you're going to have what you've experienced too, but you have to start off with. For me, I've got a purpose. I started with a purpose. I
Mm-hmm.
want to be able to help aspiring writers and artists. So that's my senior datum in the pyramid of growing my podcast. Then, what's my message? And so my message is that um, you can make it. You can get it. And then by having some of the most famous writers right now that are out there, and you find how humble their beginnings were, then you realize like, oh wow, you think of somebody like Larry Niven, who's very famous as a hard science fiction writer. He's he's Grandmaster. He's very famous for um, his science fiction books. And when I interviewed him, he was like, yeah, well, I couldn't make it in college, so I dropped out, and I liked writing. So I just started taking what I did in college in science fiction and started writing instead. And it went. Orson Scott Card, the guy that did the Ender's Game, he's very religious. So with the Mormon church, he was writing plays that were being performed in at his school at Brigham Young University. Brandon Sanderson, the right now the top selling fantasy author in the world, he almost quit when he got an honorable mention in Writers of the Future. That gave him a signal that, okay, good, you've got what it takes, just keep on persisting. And then 6 months later, he sold his first novel. So there's more and more, there's so many stories like that, and how people, they wrote their first, I wrote my first novel when I was 6 years old. I had my pencil and my paper, and it was like, I sent it in, and they rejected it. I was
Well,
crestfallen. But it's, people have their stories. Larry Elmore, the guy that created Dragonlance and Dungeons and Dragons, he was so poor from Kentucky. He had his mom and who was his single parent, and he was each week they get their groceries and they bring it home in a box. So he cut up the box, and each side of each flap of the box was his paper that he would use, and he had a pencil and a knife that he'd whittle to keep the pencil sharp, and he'd use that to learn how to sketch and draw. I mean, that's all he could afford. And now he's one of the most celebrated artists alive. So you see this kind of stuff and like, wow, I could do that, and you find women that are they've raised a family of 5 kids. They've had carried a full-time job, and how they worked in their schedule to do that. How, someone who's a caregiver, someone else who's a fireman, and how they tie it in. They kind of go, oh, I could do that. And that's when they really love. So on the podcast, I go for that on these guests, but I also, and this is the one that's hard to do, I won't interview an author unless I've read one of their books. So I'm reading a lot, and
yeah.
I wish I could, had time to listen to more audiobooks, because I love audiobooks, but I read like 3 times faster than I can listen. And I just don't have those hours. So I got to read to get through the book in time for the next podcast. When I go to conferences, I'm invited a lot to conferences. And so in February, I went to 3 different conferences, and I was able to record 10 different interviews. There's a movie that just came out last week called Mickey 17. And the guy that wrote that book, Mickey 7, I met him and I interviewed him at a conference in Provo, Utah. So then that came out just as the movie was releasing. So that was fun, being able to do that. How'd you come up with the idea? How'd you get to do it? He's one of those brainiacs. He's like a super duper physicist type thing. But he loved writing, so he fit that in, so he became a physicist and doing all this stuff because he had a family to support, but he always wanted to be a writer. So I can get these people like that. I ran into another person at a conference who was, he was the guy that wrote the screenplay to Galaxy Quest. That was a comedy science fiction movie with Tim Allen. It was really funny. It was a parody on Star Trek. Well, I'm Galaxy Press. So every now and then, frequently we go to conventions and people will hear someone on the phone saying, I'm at the Galaxy Quest booth. And so I told him, look, I'm going to get told all the time. So we did the interview and it was great. We had so much fun, talking about that. I watched some of the Galaxy Quest again. Then he's publishing a book for the first time. So I read his book and we talked about that to help him launch his career as a writer. So I love being able to do that kind of stuff. And then I get real surprises sometimes where I talk to somebody and say, are you familiar with L. Ron Hubbard? Oh, yes. I loved his Fear or Final Blackout. Battlefield Earth, I learned how to create pacing in my storytelling. That's the best book. I read that 7 times. I need to read it again. And these are from major authors. And so I get those kinds of surprises too, which I really enjoy because I publish his fiction works. So, and then they find out about the contest, and they talk about how great the contest is and how important it is for the future of science fiction and fantasy. And I get so many reviews from magazines saying nothing's done more for the future of science fiction and fantasy than L. Ron Hubbard's Writers of the Future. That's always nice to be able to have that as well. So
I
that's what
love
I
your
do.
I love your passion. You're going to have an article that's featured in our Changemaker series as part of this interview. And I always say to people who come on board to be part of this magazine, to be part of this podcast, we launched the component of our business in January. And just over the past few months, we have done so many excellent interviews with people like you where when we think about being an agent of change, you are bringing people who you're giving people an opportunity whose voices may not be heard, literally, right? Bringing people to the table, giving them opportunities to be mentored in these spaces to help them become better and reach their potential through their craft and their passion. I love that. When you talk about what's ahead, because then it doesn't seem like to me that you're going to be stopping anytime soon or slowing down, right? So what's
No.
next for Writers of the Future, Galaxy Press, and your personal mission in this world, which is publishing and creative arts and supporting these individuals' growth?
Sure. Well, obviously, I'm working on continuing to expand the podcast. We've created a free online writing workshop, which is I think up to about 10,000 people that have taken the course right now or on the course. It's free. It's taught by some of these big names I was talking about. We did. My wife is the one that produced this course, and we've got about a dozen videos of all the different pieces of how to write a story, so people can do that and help improve their their technology of how to write. I still go out and I attend various events and conventions, and I love doing interviews like this with yourself, meeting, amazingly other creatives and people that are also trying to pay it forward. I just had an interview with a gentleman named Kino Isaac in South Africa this morning, and trying to really expand throughout South Africa. We've only had 5 winners from Africa. And so Kino, you need to help me with this. So he's taking on that mission too, so we can get more people from South Africa, actually throughout all of Africa, to enter the contest. Because the only thing that stops them from winning is not submitting, so
I just want to clarify, John. The contest, does it run in quarters, or is it like, okay, so they can submit throughout the year
yeah,
because it's
they
running
submit
quarterly?
4 times a year. Every 3 months
Okay.
they can submit again. And some of the people that are very aggressive on winning the contest go for submitting every quarter. But the thing about it is that we encourage people to write. A writer writes, and L. Ron Hubbard had a creative speed of about 92 words a minute. That's how his composition speed of typing. He was writing 100,000 words a month, writing 3 hours a day, 3 days a week. And he used the money that he made from selling, because he was one of the most popular writers in 30s and 40s. He used that money to help fund his researches into the mind, which is your Dianetics and Scientology researches, and which is a whole other subject to discuss, on what he did with that to be able, again, the whole aim is to help humanity, provide a means of not just positive thinking, but dealing with those things that block a person from achieving their goals and their dreams. And, when you do stuff and you're like, why did I do that? Or I don't understand. Why does she do that? Why did he do that? To gain a better understanding of why people do that. And so thereby help them. That's just, it's a total trip and a half to be able to do that, to help somebody else and see them live a better life as a result,
Yeah.
So
I said in the beginning here, because just the initial conversation before we even came on the air, right? Like I'm stuck in this bubble of you, like you. I'm doing back to back interviews. I'm doing back to back promotions things. And so just in this conversation, when I read your bio, you brought up Ron Hubbard, and okay, first I'm thinking, okay, we're talking about the scientific books, these sci-fi books, the author, then he's the basis of Scientology, and I'm familiar with the work of Science of the Mind. And when you kind of think of all of these authors were around the same time. So Ernest Holmes did Science of the Mind, and these authors were kind of all around that same period with this focus on, mindset. So I can have a whole nother conversation with you just on that topic alone because it's so interesting to me.
Sure, we could definitely
Um,
schedule that some point down the road.
that is so interesting to me. Listen, I have to ask, I know we've gone above our time, but I have to ask you a couple more questions because I just
Sure.
want to know about you, right?
Okay,
You've
good.
answered all of these fantastic. You told us about all the stuff that you're doing through Galaxy Press, but even beyond publishing, you are so involved in community leadership, like with your friends of Hollywood Central Park, and the Hollywood Christmas Parade. So I just want to just you to share on that personal aspect. What really drives your passion for community engagement, because you can see it and feel it in just how you speak and your passion about the authors. But there's so much more to what you do. All right, and I just wanted to
Yeah,
highlight that too.
sure. Well, my when I was a wee tyke, my dad was a band leader for his high school, and so I went with him everywhere. And um, he was all about community with doing that stuff. And um, he had um, me passed away when he was 42. He had heart problems, and it was congenital. But so he was at home quite a bit because he couldn't go to work anymore. But my friends would come see me, and if I wasn't there, because I was very active as well back in high school, they just spend time with my dad. They come in there, and I come home, and they go, "Hey," and so the door was always open; anybody could come in there. And when he passed, our church, I think it held like 900 people. It was standing room only, and 2/3 were kids that were there. And so he was all about, helping and granting beingness and helping them out. And so that kind of like rubbed off on me the part about helping. And just I just get a thrill out of that. So when I do like the Hollywood Christmas Parade, there's uh we're right here right behind me there is Hollywood Boulevard.
Mhm.
And about 10 feet beyond that wall there. And that way, about 100 yards is the Chinese theater, where you've got all the big premieres, and then about another 20 yards past that is the Dolby Theater where they have the Oscars. So that I'm right in the center of Hollywood, right where I am right now. And um, so when we have this parade here, and we have all these celebrities coming out, and in our offices is the green room, so we'll have about 200 celebrities in our building. And this is where they get on the car to get onto the street. But the street is lined with like 1 million people, and this is the only opportunity they get to see these big celebrities. And so they're just the regular folk that they're the ones that keep things going. And so when they're there and you see the kids and the parents and looking like, we have 50, maybe even 100 of the famous Hollywood movie cars. That's all the famous cars that you've seen in Hollywood movies. They're all here on that, riding down there, and people are just like, oh, there's this, there's that. They're from their favorite, all the different Batman and all the Dukes of Hazzard, or all the different, um, so many different shows. I just, I get a thrill out of that. And on the thing with the Hollywood Central Park, that's been a long-term project. I'm still working on that. But again, when we get this park done over the Hollywood freeway, that's 38 acres in an area where there are no parks. And so Hollywood, the kids in Hollywood will be able to go there and play and run around in grass. This is concrete jungle where I am. So you can look at, oh yeah, this is Hollywood, but there's not, it's one of the most park scarce places in California. So I enjoy doing that. I've been on various other publishing boards to be able to help out stuff. And even when I'm not on a board, I just like doing things that can help. On I'm not, I'm getting on various publishing boards now. I'm in that category called old white guy. So um, I'm you're not welcome anymore. But I'll still help out on stuff, and they say, it's funny. I'll have a conversation with them, and they kind of like, yeah, well, you're probably the most qualified, but they say, I know I'm an old white guy. They kind of like, yeah, so because I've been around for so long doing this
Yeah, I would
stuff.
say don't let people look past your wisdom that you bring to the table with all the
Exactly. So I do
experience.
that. And that's why I like the podcast, because I'm able to do stuff with the podcast. So all these people that, the heads of all these different organizations, all the heads of all the different magazines, the book publishers, they've all been guests on my podcast. And so the head of the Independent Book Publishers Association, even though I can't be on the board, I can have her on as a guest. The head of, the almost every publishing magazine has been a guest, so, and I enjoy that. I enjoy meeting them, and I'll see them, and I have now friends, and we email back and forth. And if I need something, I'll write to them and they'll help me out. And so it's a good quid pro quo, I'll help you, you help me. And I'm just doing it because I love helping. But people are like that, good people like helping as well, so I find that anywhere I go, I find good people. It's like that old joke, the guy comes to town and says, so what are people like here? And the guy says, well, what were they like where you came from? Oh, they were bad. That's where I had to leave. And what about the place you were before that? Terrible. They're awful. So I'm really hoping that they're going to be better here. And he says, no, you need to keep moving. They're the same way here too. It's like if what you see and what you put out is bad, that's what you're going to
the
get.
energy gonna
That's
get
what
back, right?
you're going to get back. So,
And it's always better to create these environments where we are working with people collaboratively and we're looking to find the good in people. John, you are not just a fantastic publisher and president of Galaxy Press. You are a fantastic person, and this is why, like I asked you that question, right? To even outside of publishing, you are committed to as someone who is committed to having an impact, and you built out this excellent platform where you're highlighting and building people up. Where can people find you? And of course, we're going to have all of John's information in the description, the chat. We've just expanded our magazine onto platforms such as iTunes, Amazon, and iHeartRadio. And you'll be able to read his article on the site. But we'll have all of his information in the description box. So, John, tell us where people can find you. But also, we like to end these interviews by you sharing one piece of advice that it doesn't matter today, tomorrow, next week, or 10 years from now, that's kind of timeless in inspiration, and tell people, if they could be just one piece of advice that inspires people to continue to be that instrument of change.
Okay. So first of all, to find me on Facebook, it's John Goodwin, ASI. ASI stands for Author Services, Inc., which is L. Ron Hubbard's literary agency. So that's on Facebook. So you can DM me from there. Otherwise, I've got my podcast, which is Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast. It's hosted on SoundCloud, but it's on any channel that you can listen to podcasts. And then writersofthefuture.com is all these. It's a one-stop shop for everything Writers of the Future. And as the publishing arm, Galaxy Press is galaxypress.com. I think in terms of advice, is it's a poem that actually L. Ron Hubbard found that he made into one of his issues, and he just talks about like there's too much bad in the best of us, and there's too much good in the worst of us, that it ill behooves any of us to talk about the rest of us. And it's if you're looking for bad in people, it's so easy to find. But if you look for the good in people, you'll find it's actually easier to find. And I just found you are such a beautiful person. I just looking like, gosh, if I were to meet you in the street there in DC, or your next door city to DC there, I'd love to go just have a cup of coffee, then just chat. The day would blow by in no time at all. It's just, if you look for goodness in people, you will find it. That's just It's just the way it is. It's not that evil doesn't exist. It absolutely exists. Take a look at the world around us. But if we put our attention on finding the goodness in people, um, it's amazing what a difference it'll make, in their, if you just say good morning to somebody as compared to blasting them because they cut in line in front of you, just something as simple as that can make it just a world of difference. And it's not, like, it's not going to be the same thing as signing a big peace treaty and becoming a Nobel Peace Prize winner. That's what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about, like, your partner, your children, your teacher, your cohorts at work. Just good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hi, how's it going? Did you have a good day? It doesn't take a whole lot of effort, but boy, it really pays off, and it comes back to you as well. If someone chops you, don't use it as an excuse to chop back. If it's like beyond the point, then just say, okay, have a nice day, and just move on. But that's like one of those pieces of advice that people remember that, over time, they remember that, like, oh yeah, he's that guy he didn't have to be nice, but he was, just people will remember that, just like you remember when people are nice to you, and you remember when people were not nice to you. So there you go.
Then it's been a fantastic interview. Great to talk to you. I could talk to you a million times because it seems like we could have conversations that go on and on about different topics. Guys, and to take what he says to heart, just be nice. It doesn't take much to be a good person. Most of us want to be, we talk about being change makers and changing the world. It starts with who you are, where you are, and it starts with the little things that we do, right?
That's
To
right.
have an impact. So, John, it's been a pleasure today. Check out John's interview on workglobalnews.com, WORXK. Globalnews.com. This will also be available on our YouTube site and across our publishing platforms and social media. Thank you for tuning in, and have a great day.
Thank you very much.